Hello everybody, I'm Selective. This will be part 8, chapter 8 of Susurrus of the Subdued, SOS. Overhaul watched as Chronostasis carried the half-unconscious boy out of the room, eyes lingering on the door even after it shut. He then sighed before turning to look at the chair Deku once sat in. There was blood staining the right armrest, the liquid moving down the side to disappear into the long vent below. The vent was around a foot wide, and it started right in front of the chair, running from one side of the room to the other. It was designed to drain liquids out of the area so they could hose off the ground, or blood, if need be. Ignoring the itch developing on his skin from the mess, Chisaki moved over to where he had placed the sample taken from Midoriya's arm. The bloody mess was confined to a small metal tray that sat just next to all of his medical equipment. He pulled the chair that was stationed there out, sitting down soon after. He then shifted to grab a pair of tweezers in one hand and the empty handle of a scalpel in the other. He adjusted the metal pinchers in hand while simultaneously pushing both him and the chair back in order to open the drawer that lined the underside of the desk. In the drawer sat small but sharp blades, each one brand new and thereby sterile. Overhaul carefully picked up a blade in the tweezers. His other hand brought the handle close, holding it in the light for the purpose of seeing the slot correctly. He pushed the blade into the slit, making sure it wasn't going to fall out before setting the pinchers back in their respective area. Kai then used that hand to pull the tray closer and under the light hanging above. His focus moved from the blade to the piece of muscle that sat innocently on the metal plate. He shuffled closer to it in his seat, hunching over the sample as he worked on taking a thin piece off. His red-stained, gloved hands worked with practiced and smooth movements. The blade cut smoothly with a steady pace through the fibers, making sure to keep the blade from slipping. The muscle was slick with not only blood, but moisture. The cells tend to hold water within them, and the fact that they were exposed to the hot air of the laboratory was making the sample more slippery than he would have liked it to be. Chisaki would have liked to just take a blood sample from Deku, due to the fact it'd be easier to deal with. However, the fluid wouldn't have provided an ideal DNA segment that a muscle would. Muscles tend to hold things like genes better than blood does. The cells for it preserve the DNA in a protective environment, unlike blood. Furthermore, the removed tissue gives Kai a larger sample to work with, rather than just a few vials. Once a suitable sliver was cut off, he placed the scalpel down on the tray in order to minimize the amount of blood spreading amongst his workplace. Grabbing the forceps once more, Overhaul gathers the cut-off piece, dragging a new slide over and placing it atop the glass. Scooting the chair over to the microscope, he placed the slide onto the stage. Chisaki leaned over so that his eye was up to the viewpoint before the light was flicked on. The man's hand slid over to the lenses, adjusting them until he could see properly. His gaze then darted around the small area of visible cells, looking to see what was different when looking at a quirkless person's DNA, rather than a quirked individual's. With the amount of times he's needed to look at an enhanced person's genes, he doesn't really need to compare the two side by side. So, therefore, he has the ability to look at Midoriya's genes right away without needing to prep a quirked person for dissection. Yellow eyes took in every inch of the cells. He was searching for the quirk factor gene, looking to make sure it wasn't there. However, when Chisaki's eyes caught on blue, his body stilled, gaze tracking the cell. The trait was only supposed to be found in a quirked person's DNA. After all, it was the quirk factor gene. However, Deku was quirkless. He shouldn't have that type of genetic coding. It wasn't like the boy could lie about having some sort of power anyways. He had told Chronostasis his status himself. Kai's hands tightened around the microscope, quirk buzzing under his skin to reconstruct the materials. However, instead of releasing his power, he leaned back, forcing himself to relax. Calming his mind, though, didn't somehow make him magically understand why Deku's DNA had the quirk factor gene. Midoriya was quirkless. There was no reason for him to have that kind of coding, unless there was some kind of second component that assists the quirk gene. That theory could be possible, and would explain why the child had the gene. Not to mention, it would inform Chisaki on why his past experimentations haven't worked. The reason why that sort of thing would exist is still unknown. It could be that the unknown variable aids the gene in functioning properly, or that it's what's needed for the quirk to have a link to the user. Whatever the case may be, though, Chisaki needed to figure it out. If this was the key to the groundbreaking bullet to erase the filth of the world, to cure humanity from the disease that they had all grown used to, then he would look at DNA for hours, uncover new information to quirk theory, or even travel to the pits of the underworld just to drag up the information. Kai pushed himself to his feet, foregoing pushing the chair back into its spot like he would have normally done, and made his way to the lab's door. He needed to look at a quirked person's genes while simultaneously looking at Deku's in order to determine what was different. The man thought he just had to look for the small blue cell, not an unknown variable that he doesn't even know the details of. All that was important now was finding a quirked person. Luckily, that's much easier to find than the powerless. Overhaul pulled the door to his lab open, stepping out to head towards his office. He needed to make a call to a local underground broker. The man's name had made it around to the Yakuza, and it just so happens that he's known around a local trafficking ring. Places like that were easy to get a quirked person from, and since he didn't have to pay Deku like he initially planned, he had extra money to blow off. Izuku laid on the bed he was given, eyes shut. His brain felt foggy, his body feeling feather-light alongside the static. He couldn't really feel his arm by now, didn't even know if it was still there anymore. Sure, he had seen it was still on him, but when the feeling to it was cut off by what the child thinks is his brain's doing, it doesn't really feel like it was part of him anymore. Not to mention, his body was too exhausted to really comprehend things properly. Deku wanted to look around, to get to know his surroundings to their full extent, but he felt like he couldn't get up. The bed was stiff but comfortable, and it provided his tired and injured body just the right amount of tranquility to let him feel relaxed despite his circumstances. The child's adrenaline had run at some point during the transition from the laboratory he was in to whatever room he was in now. Therefore, the hangover that he had gotten from Dataro's quirk had come back in full swing, if not worse. His head had began to throb again, his heartbeat sounding out in his ears. The pain started behind his eyes, moved up his skull, and all the way to the back of his head. It sat like a heavy crown, providing just the right amount of pressure to keep him awake, despite his fatigue. Izuku didn't quite understand why he could feel the pain in his skull, but couldn't feel the pain in his arm. He knew it should hurt like hell. After all, the pain during whatever procedure the man, who he found out was named Overhaul from words filtering into his cotton-filled like ears, put him through was excruciating enough that his brain was starting to block out parts of what happened. There were gaps in his memory from after the blade went sideways in his arm to when the green child woke up here. He knows he didn't pass out. He made sure of it. But it feels like he did. Shifting, Izuku's eyes peeked open, the lids hooded over. He was still laying on his side, body feeling like he was in a state of floating. His eyes roamed slowly around the unlit room, taking it in. If he couldn't sleep and his mind wanted to race, he might as well revert back to his original desire. The area was similar to the one he was in before. There were medical-related machines all around the place, a few locked cabinets, and a small table next to the bed. The room was gray in color, the little to no light not allowing the room to have any form of life. Although the child doubts that it would have any form of life, even if there was light. Finally, it was completely sterile. Izuku was really starting to hate cleanliness. His eyes shut momentarily before they were looking at his bandaged right arm warily. From his wrist to his elbow was completely covered in white bandages, not leaving a single piece of bare skin visible. Izuku couldn't help but wonder what Overhaul did to him as he looked down at it. The boy knows that the man had cut him open, down to the bone, and messed around in there, but that's it. Deku has no idea what happened to his arm. Focusing in on the appendage, rather than the space around him, the child shifted. He dislodged his uninjured arm from under his head slowly, and shakily moved his hand to cup his other arm. His thumb moved across the bandages on his forearm, the contact sending a dull pain through the appendage. Good. There was still feeling in it. He slowly moved his finger over the more sore spot until his thumb dipped into a small dent. Izuku's heart sank, droopy eyes blowing wide. Ignoring the sharp pain radiating from the spot, the green child repeated the action, his thumb once again slipping down into his arm slightly. The boy's breath hitched. What the hell was wrong with his arm? Was this because what Overhaul did? Ignoring his body's fatigue, Izuku let go of his wrist and sluggishly moved his uninjured hand under him. He weakly pushed himself up, body shaking from the effort. His head spun with the movement, the nausea almost causing him to fall back down. But he persisted. Once fully sat up, he scooted backwards so that his back pressed against the headrest of the bed, and his head had the ability to tilt back. Taking a moment to keep the sick feeling from returning, he thought to himself, eyes shutting once more. How much blood did he lose to be this dizzy? Cracking his eyes open once more, he lolled his head forwards to look at his bandaged arm. He stared at the white for a long moment, the pale color blending in perfectly with his clothing. Sometime within the last few hours, the boy had been changed into a white, slightly oversized shirt and identical shorts. He didn't remember it, of course, but he still knew it happened. Shuddering from the thought, Izuku reached his uninjured hand towards the visible edge of the wrap. His nails dug under it, pulling it away from his arm and causing the bandage to come up slightly. He unraveled it until he could see a bit of skin. However, the child paused just as quickly as he began to take the wrap off. Izuku's foggy mind began to race. He wanted to know what his arm looked like, why it had the dent. But to do that, the bandage needs to come off. But what if he took it off and saw something he didn't want to? There was most likely something unpleasant being concealed by the bandages. Was he really ready to see it? Swallowing roughly, Izuku pulled more of the wrap off, letting it fall and pool down to his lap below. Once he got half of his wrist visible, the kid paused. There was an angry red line that stretched into the bandage, disappearing from sight. There were stitches holding it together, blood crusted around the edges. A wave of nausea, not caused by the loss of blood, flowed through his body, making his head spin. His muscles tightened, nerves burning from the cold air. His eyes squeezed shut, head snapping to the side as he tried to hold back the bile crawling its way up his throat. In one quick motion, Izuku swiftly wrapped back up his arm, his shaky hand not doing a very effective job in concealing the injury enough to keep out germs. However, it was done well enough that it was out of sight. His quivering hand held onto the edge of the bandage tightly, teary eyes peeking open to look down at it. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, throat burning from the suppressed urge to vomit. A sniffle echoed out through the silence, Deku's body giving a small jerk simultaneously with the noise. He slowly slumped down to the mattress, grip relaxing on the wrap in favor of his hand clasping around his wrist. He squeezed it, a sharp pain radiating from the grip. It shot through his arm, slowly fading once it got close to his shoulder. However, it was more grounding than an inconvenience. His head rested down on the pillow of the bed, curls spreading out amongst the flat plush. His eyes shut while he pulled his hands close to his chest. Gravity caused the green child's tears to roll down his face, leaving dark trails in their wake. His eyes slowly reddened, nose stuffing up to the point that he had to part his lips slightly in order to breathe properly. Curling up tighter into himself, Izuku slowly allowed exhaustion to take him over, his crying taking the rest of his remaining energy. At this point, Deku didn't care if the space he was in was unsafe, or that the man could come back at any moment. He just wanted to rest. His heart hurt as he lay there. His chest felt as if it was contracting into itself, the pain that was radiating out from his heart being pumped out through his veins. It flowed through his arms like water, buzzing under his skin with raw emotion. A sob croaked out of his throat, his breath hitching soon after. His thoughts were dark, each one overlapping with the last. He squeezed his arm tighter, willing the ache in his chest to go away. Although, that just made the pain in his wrist grow, getting close to the point that it didn't feel grounding anymore. The child didn't want to experience pain. Izuku just wanted to go back home. He just wanted to see his mom. Alright, everybody, that concludes Part 8, Chapter 8 of Susurrus of the Subdued, SOS. Please make sure to check out the Discord if you haven't already. If you would like to get updates easier, get connected with people within the fanfiction community, make requests for a podfic, and more. The link to the server will be in the description. Now, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for listening.